that I think all your wives will appreciate.
Oh. This is the Torah of the wives. The wives are going to love this.
The Torah of women.
Torah of women, yes. Parshat Yitro.
We're going to be doing, the first one is Torah Yud Aleph. 11.
Refilled or? No, I'm done. I think you're done.
Okay.
So everyone would going to be live. It's good stuff.
Okay. Sorry about the delay, everyone. Okay.
Okay, what are we looking at?
Number 11.
Torah 11, Drush 11.
Okay.
Kaf Aleph?
Yud Aleph.
Yud Aleph. I don't know the page number on the Hebrew, that section version of the Hebrew. I have a different version of the Hebrew.
84 in the arts for
Midrash Mesefer Pliya?
Okay. So, first of all, I hope that the bracha of the Zera Shimshon that promises, that he says, anyone who learns and is involved in learning and sharing the Torah of the Zera Shimshon, he promises that our children and our families will see only great things. Bezrat Hashem, all those who are here learning and all those who are listening should see great things from themselves, from all, and Hatzlach and everything that they do. So, the Midrash starts. There's a Midrash in Misefer Pliya, which is basically brought it's a Midrash. It's a book of kind of, I'll call it strange Midrashim, and you'll understand why in a second. It's actually brought down, in this case, it's brought down in what's called the Yalkut Reuveni in Breshit. It says, Kshala Moshe leMarom, when Moshe Rabbeinu ascended or went up to Har Sinai, Matzulo HaKadosh Baruch Mitzaolo LaKadosh Baruch Hu Shaya Umir Chava. He said, he sees that Moshe, he finds Hashem saying Chava, like Chava from the story of Breshit. Amar lo, Moshe says to him, Ki hi hayta lo ein kol chai. Right? So Hashem answered him. Hashem answers him. Sorry, I skipped one. Amar lo, Ribone de'almi, my Chava. Why are we saying the word Chava? Right? Like, what are we saying? What's the word? Why are we saying Chava? Amar lo, Ki hi hayta im kol chai. Hashem responds, as the pasuk says, Ki hi hayta im kol chai. She was the mother of the entire, world. Amar lo ribone de'alma. He says Hashem. If that's the case, im ken tikrala
Em Kol Chai.
chaya, em kol chai, right? Chai, which would be chaya, not chava, right? If we're saying it's em kol chai, she's the mother of all the women, right? Or all of creation. Excuse me, not women. If so, it says we should say chaya, like chai, right? Em kol chai, not em kol chava, right? Amar lo chava b'mispar katan em kol chai. So he says, if you look at the word
19 gematria.
right, em kol chai, chava is 19, and em kol chai mispar gematria katan. Gematria katan means if there's a number that's beyond 10. For example, the mem is 40 in the regular gematria, and if you take in the gematria ketana, you just take the 4. Anything above the number 10, you just take off the second
Up
number.
to 10 the gematria ketana.
Right.
So
if you look
at Larry in Gematria Gdola would be 30 and 200
right.
and 10. In Ketana, instead of 30, it's 3.
Right.
Instead of 200, 2.
Right. And 10 would be 1. So, in this case, em kol chai, em is aleph mem, so that's 5. Kol is 5, that's 10. Chai is 8 plus 1 is 9, so you got 19. So Chava and em kol chai are 19. Okay, so that's what the Midrash says. So, the Zera Shimshon answers the first thing he says, V'hu pela kishmo, the Midrash Pliya, which is, Pliya means wonder. He says, the entire Midrash is a wonder. I don't get it. He says, what are we talking about here? Right? What's going on?
He's going to get the Torah. What are you telling me?
Right, exactly. We're going to get the Torah. I hear Hashem sees, Moshe says, he sees Hashem saying, Chava, Chaya, who cares? And to be honest, with respect to the Midrash, who cares whether it's Chava or Chaya? What's the difference? Right? At the end of the day, what are we talking about here? As he says, right? Moshe is about to receive the Torah, and he sees Hashem saying, Chava, Chaya. Okay. And what is the whole point of why is Moshe asking Hashem, why are you saying Chava? Doesn't Moshe know that Chava was called because Chava was called Chava as opposed to Chaya or whatever it is? Like, these questions are obvious, and the Zera Shimshon generally asks very obvious questions, either on the pasuk or on the midrash. Ve'en lomar shezeh shesha'alo Moshe haya be'ed ktivat sefer Torah be'ed ktivat sefer Torah be'sefer Bereshit she'egia lechtov Chava. We can't say that this is the time. Like, in other words, Moshe was asking the question when he wrote down when he was actually writing the whole story.
Hashem.
No, he can't say that when Moshe was writing down the Torah. Right, the Zera Shimshon is we can't say that this is when Moshe was asking the question. Chava, should I write Chava? Should I write Chaya? You can't say that. Deim ken lo haya lo lakshot ela kushya achona im ken tikrena Chaya dehakrei tiktiv ki hi aita im kol chai v'lama sha'olo mai Chava. Right? If we say that this whole during the time when Moshe was writing, then it says im kol chai. So then why even mention the word Chava? Right? In other words, why would Moshe ask the word Chava? He should have just said Chaya, right? In other words, that's what the Zera Shimshon seems to be bothered by the fact that, or not bothered, but he's saying is maybe someone's going to say is this whole back and forth between Hashem was happening when Moshe wrote down the story, right? And therefore, because it was done when he was writing down the story, so that's when he was asking the questions. But he says that doesn't make sense because if the pasuk reads Ein Kol Chai, then Moshe should never should have said the word Chava.
He wouldn't ask why are you saying Chava? We're talking about Adam and Chava. If we're in Bereshit, we're talking about Adam and Chava.
Right.
And I'm not going to ask you who Chava is.
Exactly. So he says, "V'od ma'u haremes shechava mispar katan im kol chai." Like, okay, so big deal. So it's a mispar katan. That's nice and cute, but like, what's the whole remes behind it? So it's basically the similar. It seems like a very wondrous, as the name of the midrash itself. The whole midrash, this whole book is called the Midrash Pliyah. This name of this midrash. But like I said, it's very the midrashim there are very strange, wondrous, kind of unique midrashim. Not that midrashim in general are not unique, but these are even more unique. Okay, so we have one answer that I think is going to be impressive and a nice Dvar Torah for all of us to give at the Shabbos table. Okay, so it says here, "V'yuvan b'mai da'aminan midrash Rabbah al pasuk," and this is why he brings it in this week's parsha. In this week's parsha, what do we say? Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, elu hanashim, v'lama lanashim tchila kedei sheyu megadlot bneihem leTorah. So it says, what does it the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, v'tagid b'nei Yisrael. So it says, what do we look at the pasukim? Chumash, of course, when I need Chumash. Yeah, here we go. So it says. Shmot. Here we go. Okay. Look at that. Opens up almost the exact page. Okay. So it says here, you'll be a wondrous, a leader of kings, Goy Kadosh, a nation that's holy. Elad Varim. Sorry, skipped it. Let me go back. Sorry. I have. Moshe Allah El Elohim. Moshe goes up. Rashi on the spot says, Elu Levet Yaakov, Elu Hanashim. V'tagid Levnei Yisrael, Rashi says, Peresh lazacharim dvarim hakashim tigidim. Explain to the men the things that are difficult like sinews, the things that connect the muscle.
Because Tomar is Lashon Racha and Deber is Lashon Kasher. Exactly.
Okay. So he says, "Kshalam Moshe melamaro matzak sharkadosh baruch hu omer chava klomar shaTorah hi notna lenashim tchila." Right. So he says, "Is what happened." Moshe, when he goes up, he says, "Hashem
was telling him, Chava, first teach the women."
Right. Exactly. So exactly what he says here. Look what it says. He says, "Is klomar shaTorah haya notna lenashim tchila." Amar lo mai chava klomar lama nashim tchila. Amar lo ki hi hayta em kol chai b'shvil shemegadlot b'neihem letalmud Torah. So he says, "Is why do we give it Chava? Why Chava?" Right? So he says it's because we give it to the women first, because they are responsible for raising their children for Talmud Torah. Right? Now, what does that mean? So, it says, meaning their role as mother is there, if you think about it, when does the father's role start? The father's role as educating the child is at least at the minimum is age 3. Between 0 and 3, it's the Ima. Right? She loves them. She cares for them. She instills them with some sort of, basic Torah, like just the Ava and that extra stuff that, with respect to men, that don't necessarily are not always the best at it, right? And also, when you get to the point of age, when the child is at the age of learning Torah, then the father gets involved, either whatever age it may be, and that's why it says Tagid lebnei Israel. That's why it says Tomar lebeit Yaakov. That's why it says Tomar Lashon, which is like you said Lashon Rakah. Tagid is a little bit stronger. Nikret em kol chai, and this is why it's called, and this is why she's called an em kol chai, as it says, what it says in the Masechet Ketubot, minayin she'ola imo. What is the source that if a man marries a woman whose standard of living is prior to the marriage was lower than his standard? Ve'nayo read it, but if her standard was higher, her standard is not downgraded. Rabbi Elazar Amar Kihi Haita Em Kol Chai, because she was the mother of all living. L'chaim nitna. This teaches that Chava was granted as a wife to Adam for the sake of life, that she should live a good standard of living.
What does that mean? That when you get a shidduch, you should
in other words, when
take her up. You don't. In other words, don't take a woman that's a certain value and bring her down to lower value.
In other words, let's say the woman comes from a very strong background, right? In other words, strong background meaning she comes from a wealthy background. And you don't come from as a wealthy background,
so
right?
You can't marry her.
No, she said that you shouldn't reduce her standards.
So what do you do?
That I don't know. I'm not answering that. I'm just saying she should always stay with the standard of living that she's accustomed to. That I don't know. The Maharsha, so Peresh Maharsha, the Mitchila Kra Isha. First, Adam calls her woman. Isha. Dichtiv lezot ikare Isha ki meisha lukach hazot. Right. First, he calls her a woman. Right. In other words, Ish. Milashon Isha, right? Which is the feminine version of Ish. And after she sinned, Chazal Likro Chava. She called her by his name, Chava.
It's a big limud zchut. There's also, I think, a Jewish that says Chava is Chet Vav He, because she mafrid ben Vav He.
Yeah.
With the Chet of the.
Kadesh lo yamru she'ardam migdulata b'shvil hachet el achar hachet hi b'gdulata. So it said, in fact, he says is yes, maybe she sinned. But he says, so that way we don't say that baby, because of the sin, she went down in her
She's
level.
Still called Em Kol Chai.
She's still called the Em Kol Chai.
Excuse my level of understanding or any of this, but there was no standard of living with Adam and Chava. There was nothing. They were both naked for, they had no money, they had no anything.
But they were taken care of completely.
Yes, they were taken care of completely, but there's no going up, there was no going down, there was just...
No, but I think the difference is not necessarily about the standard of living, it's about what their terminology is. One, before the Chet, Adam calls her Isha, woman. And then after the Chet, he starts calling her Chava.
And you might think that after the sin, if you're a poor guy, you could lower the rich lady to marry you.
Right.
So no, she's still an Em Kol Chai. You have to keep her on her level.
She raised
him.
So why would he go to her? Because she's below now.
Well, that's the point. That's exactly the point. The point is that she's not lower.
She's still Em Kol Chai.
She's still the mother of everything.
Even though she's sick.
You can read the English. If you read the English a bit, it also explains.
I did, and that's why.
It says here. Look what it says. After she sinned with the forbidden fruit, Chazar Likrota Chava. He called her by her new name, Chava. Kidei shelo yomru, in order that people should not say about her that she was lowered from her prominence together with her husband because of the sin, and that Adam's curse that led by the sweat of his brow would apply to her as well as would be implied by the name Isha. Rather, even after the sin, she remained in her state of prominence, Em Kol Chai, right? Since she was the mother of all living. Shekol bnei haolam ba'u mimena. Therefore, Adam called her Chava to indicate that despite his living as having sinned and been cursed was with difficulty in earning a living, she was not dragged down by his sin. Right? It infers that a woman's standard of life. Okay, that's the Gemara infers that. Now, but now he says, look what he says. And the kasher, shalosh shutafim b'yesh ba'adam. Right? Don't we have 3 partners in marriage or in life? Right? Who do you have?
Hashem.
Good.
Gives the neshama.
Right. You have the father.
The Abba gives the bones, and the Ima gives the blood.
The blood. Right. Exactly. That's in Kedushin. Right? What happens? You have only 1/3. Right? You have 3 parts. That means each person is part.
So why are you calling her
Right? So why are we all consider her the descendant of Chava and not Adam? Right? Aval tamhu, the reason is Fisha Isha megadlet habanim la Torah, that the woman raises her children in preparation for the Torah study. Yoter me'aish, since the mother is the primary rearer of the young children. Vehedya amrina, in fact, we say later in Sanhedrin, right? It says that the role of raising children, the role that is filled primarily by the mother, is even more significant than the bearing of children, right? There, the Gemara cites a verse that what states that Michal had 4 sons to Adriel. Merav Yalda, right? Merav Yalda, Michal Gadla. V'nikru al Shem Michal, because raising the children is more significant than bearing them, right? He calls them Michal's children. Tichtiv Asher Yalda Michal. L'chen nikru al Shem Ha'isha. So what have we learned so far? We're learning Torah Yud Aleph. So it says so far. 11.
So also like Bat Paro.
Right, exactly. Bat Paro.
He had a name that he was named by his parents.
But whatever the name was, we don't know what it is, right? But
I mean, Tuvia or
whatever,
Victor,
right? Or Victor, right?
Yeah.
But you're right, exactly. So the same idea that the concept is page 388, if you want to look at it in English. So the concept is that the women, even though the point is that we look at the order of the pasuk, what is the Zera Shimshon bothered by? To kind of give a quick summary, the Zera Shimshon is bothered by the fact that you have this strange midrash called the Pliyah, which means wondrous, and indeed is wondrous. And it's a strange midrash in the fact that it doesn't really explain to us what's going on here. Moshe goes up to Hashemayim when he's getting the Torah. He sees Hashem saying the word Chava, Chaya, whatever, and there's a very strange conversation between the two of them. And so the Zera Shimshon asks the question: why do we have to even go into this whole conversation that Hashem has with Moshe about Chava, Chaya, and the gematria? So he answers the question by saying is that if you look at the pasuk in this week's parsha, right before Bnei Israel get the Torah, it says Ko Tomar Leveit Yaakov Elu Anashim V'lama LaNashim Tchila. Why do we give the Midrash asks why do the women get it first? Kedei sheyu megadlot b'neim LaTorah, because the women need to get the basic structure in order so that they raise their children properly, right? The men could only wait because their job and responsibility only starts later. Right, so what he says is that the women get the first taste of the Torah because they're the ones who give the children the first taste of the Torah. So he says that is exactly the whole point here, is that even with right. So he says, and more so, and he goes through this whole thing, and he says, why is it that Hashem? Why is it called Chava and not? Why we start calling her Chava, as we mentioned later, that the Chava. Adam starts calling her, referring to her as Isha first, because Ish and Isha, right? And then he realizes that after the sin, you might think that maybe after the sin, she should no longer be, get that credit, get that title. And he says, no. Adam started calling her Chava, and from there the Gemara learns that that even after the sin, she is not liable to the punishment that Adam got, which was that he has to sweat and work hard. He's not liable. She's not the same.
No, she got a punishment.
Right, but it's not the same. But she doesn't because Be'etzev Toldido Banim is not the same punishment as what Adam got. Adam got is that you're going to have to work hard for your money. Right, that's what Hashem basically said. Is you're going to right. But he says B'zeat Pechato Chalechem. That's for the man, not for the woman. And then from there, the Gemara learns. What does the Gemara learn? That the woman, she comes to a certain standard into the marriage. She stays at that standard no matter what. That's the role of the husband, is to make sure that she stays at that standard. It's not that she lowers her standard for the husband.
From the word and
wife,
yeah. No. From yeah.
Mine's a bit Cinderella style.
What's that?
He was going to say about Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah.
It's her option.
It's her option, right? She doesn't have to.
You can go there.
Right, you can.
But that's I could say, or I need to be.
Or right, she could be mivateret.
Yeah, she was Malchus.
No, she can say, I'm willing to go down because I want my husband to learn, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, she slept in the straw.
Right, but that doesn't mean that the halacha says is that by halacha, by straight halacha, right? By straight halacha, her job is the husband is responsible to say this is the standard, and therefore I have to keep to it. But if she decides to say I'm willing to forgive that, that's something else. Okay, so now we have, and then what do we say? Why do we have a third? So we have this question, the famous question, where the Gemara says you have three partners in the three partners in a person. what are the three people? Hashem, or three partners. Hashem, man and woman. So why do we call it Ein Kol Chai? We should be calling it also Adam, because he gets a part of it too, right? There's to each one. Why do we only mention after a third?
Because give a putrid drop. That's
what's that?
all he does to contribute to
Exactly,
a putrid
right.
drop.
Exactly. Well, that's part of it. And the other part of it is that Hashem says because she is the woman is responsible for those first 3 years. Those first years are so impactful on what the child's future looks like. That's why we give
also the child, he learns the Torah in the mother's stomach.
Right.
But
Right.
he forgets it all.
So then I'm going to go into. Hold on one second here. So what do we learn from this? I'm going to. Here, if you go to the last paragraph, just because I think the last paragraph is nice. We'll go to the last. Amarlo. Let's go to the second to last paragraph. We're going to skip two inamis. Inamis, he gives two other options. But he's going to go to at the end. He kind of goes back to like the beginning part of it again. So we're going to go that. It says, and this is why, and this is why, that Hashem, the Chava symbolizes the speech of life-giving Torah, right? And this is why when Hashem went up to Shemaim, when he goes up to receive the Torah, it says he sees Hashem saying Chava. Shaliknot Torah v'achayim shenimshala l'isha b'vaday nimshalu l'isha rishona. Right, so he says this is why, because in order for Hashem, that Hashem wanted that in order for us to acquire the life-giving Torah, which is the responsibility of the woman, right? In other words, he explains it earlier, which I skipped intentionally. He says is symbolized by a woman. He basically saying is that the responsibility and to acquire Torah properly, the woman has to give that extra push, that extra love, that extra care that a man doesn't always necessarily give. I'm not saying that the man can't do it, but generally speaking, the woman's love and support is necessary for someone to feel, the mother, I'm not saying woman, the mother's responsibility towards a child is to give that care, that extra hand, that extra support, that things that sometimes the father doesn't always give.
That's what happened with Moshe, with Yocheved.
Right, exactly. Yocheved is there, exactly right.
The mother.
Right, and the Yocheved said, I give the mother, let the mother take care of the baby, and therefore what happens? The mother, and then raised, right, exactly. And this is why he says here, why specifically the faculty of speech, in other words, Kmo Chava, right? That Torah study, he says, this is the Zera Shimshon saying, Davka Dibor Kmo Chava. Torah study needs specifically the ability to speak like the name Chava. Shafa Pishayaita Im Kol Chai, even though Chava was indeed the mother of all living, and therefore she should have been more appropriately called Chaya. Im Kol Zeh, right? This goes back to the question. Now we can start. All right, we're going to go back. We'll start again. Charles likes to do. We'll give it. That's okay. You were on live, but I don't know if they were.
How's Chava?
For some reason,
the word Dibur.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Why is Chava connected to Dibur?
We're going to get to it in a second.
The word Chava means Dibur?
We're going to get to it in a second. But he says is why? But if we still have a question. The question remains for the Midrash Pliyah. Why is she called Chava and not Chaya? Like you said, if she's Aim Kol Chai, then she should be called Chaya. We still have this question. So the part that so he says here, V'hachanami, the same is true about the Torah. Afa pisha Torah ikarahi amoach v'machshava v'asvara mikol makom hadibur hu yoter chashuv. Right. So he says here. So he says it's same thing. Im kol zeh, she's called Chava is called Chava, even though we think that she should be called Chaya, like Moshe says in the Midrash, and that our whole logic is based on the fact that we Chaya, right? Makes sense. So he says is that the Torah, the power and the ability of speech is similar to Chava. We're going to get to why in a second. And he says the Torah, similarly to the Torah, we can all use our brains and think about things internally. But the only thing that really helps and it really enables us to really acquire the Torah is that ability to speak it out, in other words, to talk it out and to really converse. So he says here, V'amar ribono de alma by Chava. What is the purpose? Why is she called Chava? V'lama dibur yoter chashuv. Why Moshe is saying to Hashem, why is the speech so important? Right? Why is the speech so important in terms of learning Torah? Amar lo ki hi hayta em kol chai, because she was the mother of all living. What does that mean? Shadibur kulam shavim bo. That is to say, speech in
other words, you and any biggest tzaddik in the world, you could read the same text.
Exactly.
But what's in your head is different.
Exactly.
So Em Kol Chai is the reading.
Right, and he says you're ben Amei Aratzot uvein Chachamim. Right, all like you said. Any person can read the same Torah, read the same Gemara, can read the same anything. Right? What's the difference? Upatatia do'oraita tavin. The sages say, the Chachamim say that in Yerushalmi, he says that even the chatter, right, just talking about Torah is valued. Uschar kriya biyado, and one is rewarded for it. Yes. Aval b'machshava usfira ein hakol shavim. Ki lav kol mocha machal ru'im svara. He says since not every mind is suited for logical analysis, in other words, not everyone's brain is the same. We can all read the same words. Right? We all can read, thank God, right? We can all read, but we all read the words the same way, right? We'll all say, Vayomer Hashem o Moshe Lemor. We'll all say it. But one person will say as well, Vayomer here, Vayomer there, right?
You know, that's pretty typical when the 12 tribes brought their offering. It was all the same, but it meant different.
Exactly. That's the same exactly.
For them.
Exactly. That's exactly what he's saying. He's saying is that the Chachamim, the people who are, let's call it the leaders of our generation, and the people who are simple-minded can both read the Psukim the same way. The difference is how they analyze things in their brain. Right? Interpret it. Thank you. That's a better word. Right? Now he says, okay, now we'll go back even more. He says, Amar lo im kein tikrena chaya. If so, that if we say that shehu shayach yoter le'im kol chai. Right? So now we even explain it even more. He says, if so, let's call her chaya. Right? Because whereas chava is derived from the word, right? In other words, is a derivative form. Chava is a derivative form of the word chaya. Mikom nishma mina minami. At the same time, it also implies shadibur yoter ikar. That speech is the principal aspect of Torah. What's the difference between someone who's alive and someone who's not alive? The difference ability is what? To speak. Right? One of the main things is obviously they can't breathe anymore, but one of the main things is that we can't speak. Right? V'od ki unklus tirgem. I love this because this is one of the best unkluses in the world. And unklus says, what? It is. Vayhi adam lenefesh chaya. And what does unklus say? Ruach memalala. Right? The ability for us to speak.
It's world famous.
Right? What?
My Gachuri is a world famous Rashi.
Right, world famous, right. So, right, exactly. Rashi quotes, right, he's quoting the unklus. Right, he says, Chava b'mispar katan em kol chai. The gematria of Chava is the same as the small gematria of em kol chai. Im hayiti koreh la Chava, mashma dibur shalem, dahainu k'shadam yeh gadol, v'yisa v'yitem b'torah karoi hadibur mevi chayim.
Why is chaya dibur shalem?
Okay, v'zeu hadibur ha'chashuv. Adosh baruch hu, hold on, abinei kadosh baruch hu. אבל כשהתינוק קטן, הוא מדבר ואינו יודע מה לדבר, ואימו מחנכתו, הייתי אומר שאין הדיבור חינוך זה חשוב לפני המקום. לכך קרבה חווה. כלומר, כל זמן שידבר בתורה, יהיה מי שיהיה קטן או גדול, הוא חשוב בעיני המקום, לכן נקט מספר קטן. שאדרבה, העולם עומד על הבל תינוקות, שהוא הבל שאין בו חטא. So what he's saying is, that Chava represents, and I skipped it because it's a little bit complicated in there in the Zera Shimshon.
Does the word Chava mean speech anywhere? Because it says Yechavet Da'at somewhere.
Right.
Does it say there?
I don't remember. Let me just see here. Doesn't mention it here. But he says, but the idea is that Chava represents an aspect of, let's call it, smaller-minded talking conversations, right? Which is what happens when a mother talks to a child when she's younger. She does the smaller stuff. She does the cooing, she does the loving, she does the kill for a little bit. Yeah. So she says, she mentions that kind of conversation. That's what the mother does. And if had Hashem called her Chaya, which is like what's called the older, more mature, then people might think, this is what the Zera Shimshon says. He says is that people might think that that's the only ikar of the conversation. In other words, it's only the talk that the logical, the high talking between chachamim. And he says, no. The chatter of Torah is just no matter what. Just like a woman when a woman speaks to her child when the child is young, and she does those small, caring signs of love and caring of raising that child. Those words, those things make a huge impact in the child, right? So you might think that stuff has no meaning, but he's saying is if we look back, that's why the woman is mentioned Kotomar Levnei Yaakov, Kotomar Levet Yaakov. Excuse me. He says Levet Yaakov. That's what Rashi and the Gemara and the Midrash says that referring to what? Referring to the women. So he says this is the value of the women is that the women have that first responsibility to raise the child, and that first responsibility, even though the conversation itself is quote unquote less, high level, less impressive, that like the Torah that happens after the child learns to develop and speak, that talking, that speak, and that conversation that they have is even on a higher level, and therefore that's why the woman is mentioned first in the order of which Matan Torah, and also mentioned as Chava is mentioned. Chava is representative of a conversation that happens that doesn't necessarily, it's like that smaller chatter that happens in between the bigger conversations. So yes, everyone can speak, can read, we can all read the same words like you said, right? Even Chachamim and Shutei Am can read the same Sukkim, but the point is that the brain that develops at a different pace, and so some people have like this wondrous ability to develop, but it only is because the woman was able to help the child grow up. And that smaller conversation happens first, and that small chatter that happens between a mother and a child, that connection happens early. And that connection is really what the power of that the woman is available to do to her child.
Beautiful. Wow.
First one. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah.
There's another good one.
Wow.
Kol Rabi.
Yeah.
One of my favorite vegetables. It's the Israeli version of jicama. You know jicama?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Did you finish all of your dollar?
It's awfully short. Yeah, pretty much. I skipped one paragraph.
Alright. No, I just got here. Maybe we've only been here like a half hour, right? Wow.
31 minutes.
Which round is great? 22.
So like Moshe says, Hashem, I don't get it. What are you saying? Why are you saying Chava? Right? You should say what? Chaya, because she was called Em Kol Chai. And Hashem says, no. He says, no. Mispar Katan Em Kol Chai is Chaya. Chava is Mispar Katan Em Kol Chai. Em Kol Chai is 19 in Mispar Katan. And Chava is 19. That's the Midrash. And the Zera Shimshon, just like you and I are listening, as I'm repeating it, it's one of the vaguest, strangest Midrashim we've ever heard of in a while. Right? Most of the Midrashim we've heard, we kind of know what's going on. We have no idea what's going on here.
A lot of the Midrashim about Moshe going up to heaven are weird.
Yes.
They start out
Oh,
weird.
so's the Pshat. You can hardly blame him.
Yeah, but he's like, you should have said hello. Why didn't
Right,
you say
right.
hello? That's a
Right, yeah.
very well-known one.
Yeah.
So the first thing Hashem is saying is Chava.
Right.
That's the first word, like the only thing.
The first question. So the first question
What is
that
happening?
Moshe asks is why Chava, and then Hashem responds.
Oh, when Moshe Rabbeinu went up, Mechila, he heard Hashem saying Chava.
Yeah. And then
That's how it
Moshe
starts.
says,
So
yeah,
Moshe
and
says,
you're going to tell me my
Yeah.
Chava.
Right.
What are you saying Chava for? And he says because she's Em Kol Chai. So why was she called Chaya?
Right.
No, because Chava is Gematria Em Kol Chai.
Right.
Very nice.
That's nice, but what? Okay. So, okay. And as I like was to say, and therefore, what? Like, what have we learned? What is the Midrash added to our...
Right.
Usually the Midrash is there to kind of help us enhance something about what we just missed.
And
then he connects
and then
it.
the question is, why does Moshe ask my Chava? Like,
Right.
he knows, because it's a pasuk in Bereshis. He's Em Kol Chai. We can suggest that Moshe doesn't know the pasuk.
Right. So, Zera Shimshon says, maybe you want to say that it was Moshe, this whole conversation was when Moshe was writing down the Torah, and he got to the point, so he says, should I write Chaya or Chava? Right? He says, but that doesn't make sense either, because the pasuk says Em Kol Chai, so he shouldn't even be asking Chava, Chaya. Like it says Em Kol Chai, so that it should be obvious to Moshe to say Chaya. So he says, I don't get it. So after a few psukim, after back and forth a little bit, he basically says is that the woman. He connects it to this week's parsha through the pasuk that says, "Kol Tamar Leveit Yaakov," and the women, the pasuk and the midrash says, "Elu Hanashim," and then Rashi right afterward, and Rashi quotes that midrash, and then the same thing, "V'tagid Bnei Israel," and that's the Rashi says there, "Tell the men." So it's like Rashi, and obviously through the midrash understands that there's one is referring to the women, and one is talking to the men, and he says that basically the women were receiving the Torah first because their job is to raise the children first. Their job is to raise their children between that time, between 0 or age, birth, and whatever age we decide that's
from also in the stomach, the 9 months.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the time and that influence is so important to what's going on, and he says, if you look at the way, he says, go back to the story of Adam and Chava. What happens first? Adam calls Chava, he calls her Isha. Why? Because mi ish lukach hazot, right, from the man. And from there, the Maharsha learns, and the Gemara also sort of learns. The Maharsha learns from the Gemara there that a woman is not allowed to be downgraded to her standards, right? Because originally she was called Isha, so you would think that Isha is a higher level. And then after the sin, she's called Chava. So you would say, wait a minute, she just went down, right? Because first she was calling Isha, which means that Isha and Isha are on the same level. The answer is no. The answer is that they're still on the same level. They're still on the same level, and she was not. Just because he was punished in the way he was punished doesn't mean that she should be punished in the same way, because his punishment was that you have to work hard for your money. Her punishment was something totally different. It means that whatever money and the Maharsha learns from there that whatever money she came in with or whatever standard she came in with, that's the way she should stay. Not because she shouldn't be punished, quote unquote, because the husband does something. Okay, so then Yaakov asked a good question. So what about a woman like Rabbi Akiva's wife who decided to go into the poorhouse? That was her choice. But the halacha, dry halacha, is that you should not, the woman doesn't have to go down. Now, then you have a question as to why we have this famous Gemara that says there are three shutafim in birth, right? Or in children, whatever it is, right? You have Hashem and the man and the woman. And then why do we say that the woman is the most important? Because the woman, and he says, is because the woman is the one you named. The child is most inspired by, or the woman, the person who raises the child the most. And he brings a pasuk and he brings quotes, or he brings a proof from Sanhedrin that says that when Meirav gave birth to the children, right? But Michal raised them, and therefore they're called the children of Michal. Because the woman itself is the one who raises the children. Is the one that it's that extra stuff that doesn't happen in between the learning, right? It's those extra times, those extra moments when the mother sits down with the child, when the mother cares for her, gives the food, says you're doing a great job. That extra stuff, with all due respect to men, that we don't always get to do so well, right? And so I'm not saying that we're all great people, but I'm just saying that I think the mothers have it better in that case. And therefore he goes, and then I skipped 2 paragraphs. Those paragraphs are probably what you have your question about why Chava is a better expression of a full than Chaya. Like he basically goes through it a little bit there and explains that basically the Chava is a better expression of full speech and conversation, and it's like a higher, it's an important level. And basically, he ends with the idea is that the speech that we have, the ability, the difference between us and people who are not alive are the ability to speak. And in Ruach Mimalala is like this ability for us to talk. And everyone in this world can, right? What's the difference between you, me, and some other, Lahabdil Gedolim, right? We all read the same psukim, right? We all read the same psukim. Their ability to think and, make connections and understand things in a deeper way is not something that we all have. But what's the similarity between us? We all have the ability to speak.
That's the Em Kol Chai.
Right. The Em Kol Chai is that ability to speak, the ability to make that conversation and to talk it through. So yes, their conversation about Torah may be different than ours, but we're all speaking. And the ability to speak and the ability to raise that, and he even says that it's that small, the small stuff, the small words of encouragement, or small word. The English translated as chatter. Like that small stuff that the mother does that the father may not do as much. In other words, he's saying is that it's that smaller conversations that we have around Torah that make the Torah even more beautiful, and therefore the woman. That's why he says that's why she's called Chava, and also it's because of the fact that, and then he brings the proof of the Kotomar Lebeit Yaakov V'Tagid B'nei Yisrael. He's saying is that's why the Torah says the woman received the Torah first. It also expresses a little bit of a conversation, a little bit of a understanding of how the generations are, how things are passed down from generation, and the importance of moving things and passing things from generation to generation. When you see that the woman's role is not only to just raise the children, but their role in raising the children is that encouragement and that ability to really give them that chizuk that they need, that sometimes they don't necessarily get. All right, that was Yud Aleph. Now let's go to Yud Tet, which also talks about a Yud Tet 19. Okay, let me just
say this one was like the woman's epigenetic role
There you go.
in, if we think that it's 50-50, we're way off.
Right.
It's
It's not 50-50. Exactly.
what she does.
It's very important.
Yeah, it's beyond. And it seems to be that also the way to speak softly, the Torah it's got to be brought to a level that
Right.
a kind way of speaking. Otherwise, you could be just reading words, but the message is lost and
Right.
the person
That's
is
it.
harsh.
That's right. It's part of what I skipped in that drush is exactly that. That the conversation, that smaller, softer speech, that ability to give, like I said, they'll give those encouraging words that sometimes are so important. Right.
Yes.
That extra thing that husband and wife can say the same thing to a child, but sometimes the woman's words are just that extra bit of softness, that extra bit of tone, that extra bit of care makes all the sensitivity, whatever you want to call it, makes all the difference in how the words come out, right? And timing, right? Timing is also very important, and sometimes, unfortunately, we're not necessarily very attuned to that. Okay. Now, I'm going to read the psukim about this parsha, about this intentionally first, so that we can all understand the question that he's about to ask. Where are we? Okay. We ready? Okay, we're ready. So, so it says like this. Vayomer Moshe, this is that right before Matan Torah. He says, Vayomer Moshe el Hashem, Lo yuchal am la'alot el Har Sinai, ki ata yidota banu lemor hagbel tahar v'kidashto. So Moshe says, this is Pasuk Kaf Gimel, and I'm intentionally reading one Pasuk before the one he's quoting. He says, Moshe says to Hashem, the nation, Bnei Israel, won't go up to Har Sinai, because you just told us, stay away from the Har Sinai. Okay? Right? You told me and everyone, this is Kenim, right? To surround the nation, to surround the city, and Kidashto, make it holy. V'yomer elav Hashem lech red v'alita v'ata v'aronimach v'akohanim v'am al yersu la'alot el Hashem pen yifrotz bam. So what does Hashem say? Hashem says, go down and then go back up. Lech red v'alita ata v'aronimach. What's the problem with that pasuk?
Because he wants to go bring Aaron.
Okay, but why does he go back down at all?
He has to go get Aaron.
Okay, but he could have just said, tell Aaron to come up.
How? He's already up.
No, sir.
No stuff. So you could say Aaron come down, or Hashem could have. What?
Hashem could have called him.
Right, he could have said Hashem come up, or
he could have said Aaron come
why
up.
Moshe? Why does he tell Moshe at all to go down? Why does he say Moshe come up, go back down, come back up again? Right? Sounds a little strange to me, right? And look what
Wait, Moshe's up now?
Moshe's up.
Hashem says, tells him
go back down, pick up Aaron, and go back up again.
What's so weird about it?
Why go back down again? Like
Get Aaron.
Okay, but Aaron's not even there when Matan Torah happens.
Oh, he doesn't bring Aaron up?
He brings Aaron up, but he doesn't bring him up all the way to receive the Torah. He's like halfway.
So
What have we done?
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Okay? And if you look at the psukim, if you look at the way the psukim order, listen to this. He says, Lech red. Yes. Look what it says here in the beginning of Shishi, the Pasuk Haf. I'm sorry, I should have read this first. Vayered Hashem el Har Sinai, el Rosh Har, vayikra Hashem leMoshe, el Rosh Har vayal Moshe. Hashem tells Hashem, Moshe's Hashem's at the top of the mountain. He comes like Ki'ilu comes down to the mountain, and he says, Moshe, come back up, come up, not come back up, come up. Vayomer Hashem Moshe, red, ha'ed ba'am, go down. So what just happened? This is Pasuk Kaf Aleph.
Go down.
You come up, go down, come up, go down. But the Pasuk Kaf Aleph, it says, go down to the nation, pen yersu el Hashem l'rot v'nafal mimenu rav. V'gam Hashem, v'gam.
We told him, go make sure that they're not going to come up.
Right, go make sure, and also make sure that you're down there. Right? So what just happened here? We have a conversation of 10 psukim, or 5 psukim, that you say, Hashem says, go up, come down, go up, come down. Like, what are we doing here? Right? Not only that, he says, if we look at the psukim and we look at the whole conversation, and this is not part of what the Zera Shimshon says, but if we look at the way the psukim are structured, you see that the Matan Torah, the first part of Matan Torah, Moshe was not up at the top of the mountain. The way the Psukim read, let's see if I can, let me just see it, okay. Where it says, look what it says here, Pasuk Kafei, after I just, that whole back and forth, it says, Vayir Moshe Ala'am, Vayomer Alehem, the next Pasuk says, Hashem starts giving the Aseret to Dibro. So where was Moshe at the first part?
People.
With the people. So,
even though they also say to him,
right,
please.
Right, exactly. So where was Moshe? We all think we were all raised. Where were we all raised to think what? Moshe was at the top. When Hashem was giving the Torah, where was Moshe? Right next to him. Psukim say no. Psukim say absolutely not. Vayired Moshe Ala'am. So this is an aside. This is not this actual main part of what the Zera Shimshon is saying is, but one of the main questions that people have about Matan Torah is, go prove to me that what? That it actually happened. How do I know that it actually happened?
600,000
right.
Jews were there.
Exactly.
More than that. No,
Right. That's
the Jews.
right. But how do we know that it happened?
You can't call on all the Jews.
Right. Exactly. No, but
all religions say that he went up
Can't
and
call
came
one
down.
Jew.
right.
That's the point you're making.
Right. Exactly. All religions say is, I don't get it. Right. There's got to be something. There's something doesn't make sense to me.
Why?
Go prove to me that everyone's that this actually happened. So how would you, if Moshe was at the top, so then someone could say, well, listen, Moshe said whatever he said from the he said whatever he said from the top. Who knows if Hashem actually told him? But if we looked up Psukim, the Psukim say, no, Moshe was at the bottom. Why did he want Moshe at the bottom?
So we'll also receive it.
So you'll also receive it, so that no one could say is, oh, Moshe was up there, and Moshe made up some weird laws, and therefore that you guys are following it. 5,700, 600, whatever, 1,000 years, 5,600 years later.
It's 5,600 years ago?
No, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying 3,000, whatever, 3,000 years later, you're still talking about some guy who gave some weird laws. No. If you looked up Psukim, Moshe was at the bottom with us. Why? So that way no one could ever say...
That's the reason?
No, I'm just... The person who I listened to the shir about this specific Torah, he says is, one of the things we should look at is the Psukim are clear that Moshe was at the bottom. Hashem wanted... And if you look at the pasuk that right before he said, Hashem gives gives us out to Divrot, he says, I want you to be with the Am. He says, Lech Red, go down. I want you to be there with them, so that way no one, and he says, Pen Yer, what did he say? Excuse me, he says, Pen Yer Su El Hashem Lerot V'nafal Mimenu Rav. He says, God forbid, someone's going to say, oh Hashem, that wasn't Hashem that did it. V'nafal Mimenu Rav. So if you read the Psukim that way, you could say, wait a minute, now I understand why Moshe was down at the bottom with the people. Because everyone received the Torah that day. It wasn't Moshe up there and us down here, and Moshe said some weird things that we don't really know. Did he really say it? Did he not say it? No, he was with us, right? That way the chain of tradition never broke, because there's no break, right? Hashem told all of us, yes, we may have been confused or overwhelmed by Hashem's speech, but we were all there. And therefore, and then when you say, my great, whatever Mount of grandfathers was there standing at it, it's not that he heard it from some guy who said that Hashem spoke to him. It was we were all there with Moshe, right? That's how the chain. That's the chain. Now let's go back for a second. Back to our original question. We're in Torah Yud Tet 19, and he says, "Vayomer alav Hashem lech red v'alita ata v'aron imach." Tzarich Iyun. We need to ask a question. By kasavar Moshe shabitchila me'en leredet va'omra lo yuchal ha'am v'achar kach shechazar lomar lech red me'ad yarad. So if you look at the Psukim, it says Hashem said to Moshe, "Go down," and then he says, "Go back up," and then you shall go back up with Aaron, but the Kohanim and the rest of the people stay down. So we have to understand what was Moshe's logic here, right? First, he says, "I don't want to go down," right? Go down. When Hashem says to Moshe, "Descend and tell the people, don't get close to Har Sinai," he says, "I don't want to." Because he says people won't ascend, right? You were told us not to. So what are you asking me again to repeat it? Like Moshe is basically challenging Hashem and saying, "Hashem, we got it. I got what you're saying. Don't worry, Bnei Israel are good." Right? We can all hear ourselves saying this. "I got it. You told me the first time, dear. Don't worry, it's all good. I got it." And then she repeats it, and you're like, "Why do you have to repeat it?" Right? So it's kind of, I don't want to say chutzpah, but let's just say, for lack of a better term, Moshe was a little bit like, I don't understand what's going on here. Okay?
Is the pshat because Hashem thought maybe Moshe Rabbeinu didn't realize whoever gets close will die. Like
No, that's not the pshat, but that's the
no,
pshat.
pen yirsum
Right,
menorav.
right.
Pen yirsum menorav is the pshat.
Right, the pshat, right.
Like, you better go make sure, because
right.
if not, they're gonna die.
Right.
No?
Right. So now he says, okay, and then after the second time, right, Hashem says the second time, go down. Miyad, you're right. Then Moshe says, okay, I got it. I'm going to go down. Right? First Moshe does, what does he do? The first thing he says is, no, but. Like he basically says, Hashem, I don't want to. Right? He kind of argues with Hashem. And then the second...
What does he say in the pasuk?
He says, Shabbat me'in laredet, as it says, Lo yuchal la'am.
They can't move. We told them not to go close.
We told them not to do it. They're not going to do it.
I don't need to go back down.
Right. You don't have to tell me a second time, right? Have you ever heard that statement before? Don't tell me a second time. I got it already. No, go. Don't tell them. Tell them not to come down. Okay, you told me a second time. Now go down again. And he says, okay, after arguing one quick little argument, Hashem says, okay, go down, get Aaron, and tell the rest of the people not to come up. Moshe says, fine, I'm coming down. I don't get it. אלא דקשר, דאי הכי בתחילה נמי היה לו להבין שהקדוש ברוך הוא יודע שכבר הגביל את העם, ואפילו הכי אמר לו רד בעם, ולא היה לו לסרב. And he says, it seems that we could answer what? That once Moshe saw that Hashem still wanted him to go down, despite the fact that Moshe was not excited, right? He shouldn't have said, what should he have not said? I don't want to. Like he should not have said with bechutzpah saying is, don't worry, I got it, Hashem, we understand you. Right? Hashem basically said there was no reason for Moshe to hesitate. Once Hashem understood what's going on here, let's go back. Right? We should have said that we should be able to answer that once Moshe saw that Hashem still wanted him to go down, even though Moshe said, I don't want to, right? What should he have not done? Said no. Right? Hashem says, don't go, it says, go down. Moshe says, I don't want to go down. People got it. Then Hashem says, go down. Right? And Moshe says, Moshe shouldn't have said, no, I don't want to do it. Rather, he should have said, okay, let's go. Right? And only after he said, go down to pick up Aaron, then he says, okay, I'm going to go do it. And it doesn't make sense. He says, Ela de kasher, but this difficulty for us to say, there's a difficulty for us to say that Hashem, basically what it sounds like, Hashem doesn't even listen to what Moshe's argument was. What was Moshe's argument? Bnei Israel got it. We got it. I understand what you're saying. Don't worry. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to get close. And Hashem just basically disregards Moshe's complete argument and just says, just do it. Right? And he says we have a problem with it. If it was so that upon learning that Hashem wanted him to warn the people again, despite what Moshe said, Moshe should have understood this from the start, when he said to warn the people. Right? Doesn't Hashem know that he just warned the people? Like it's a pretty obvious statement to say that Hashem knew that he warned them already once, right? And still Hashem told Moshe what? Go down and warn the people. Moshe should not have objected. Apparently there's something about the way that the fact that Hashem disregarded Moshe's entire argument or back and forth, there's something underlying that we have to understand. Right? And why did Moshe say yes the second time but say no and give an argument the first time? That's really his question. Okay? Now he says, V'od, lama kadosh baruch hu b'pam hazot amar lo valita tavar rimach. Shenireh shemoshe haya mitzareh pen lo yirtzeh sheyaleh od. Right? What did we say? Why does he...
Seems to hear that when Moshe Rabbeinu said, when Hashem told them, go back down and make sure they're not... Moshe Rabbeinu was worried, like, you're not coming back up.
Exactly.
So that's why he said, oh, no, I already warned him. I want to stay here with you, master.
Exactly. That's exactly
Hashem
right.
said, no, don't worry. You're going to come back up with Aaron.
Exactly. So look what he says is, Pen lo yirtzeh sheyaleh od. Maybe Hashem doesn't want to go back up. Right? Aval ata shivticho sheyaleh lo me'eh ve'yarad. He says, don't worry. Hashem promised him that he will go back up. Even after warning the people. Right? Then Moshe says, okay, then he says, fine, I'll go down. What was Moshe so scared of? What was Moshe so scared of that when Hashem said go back down,
he was scared that he's going to stay down.
Exactly.
And he was so excited to be there with Hashem.
So he's going to give you a beautiful shot, absolutely beautiful shot. He's going to say something.
He's so excited to be with Hashem.
There's something here that, first of all,
down?
in general, one of the things that I love about the Zera Shimshon is the way he connects midrashim and gemaras and things like that. But sometimes you're just like, I don't even know how he got to this. But you're just like, wow. You're just like, wow. Okay, so this is one of those opportunities. Look what it says here. It says when in the first parak of brachot on daf vav, not that I know the Gemara by heart, it just happens to say it in the thing. It says,
not yet. You don't know it yet.
Exactly.
Rabbi Shlomo Katz says in Baal Shem Tov,
right.
Not yet.
Not yet, right.
Adain lo.
Adain lo, right. So he says, "V'yuvad b'may bet parak brachot." We come about the brachot, the first parak of brachot. Hayotzemi bet knesset ayafsi apsida gedola. Right? What? Agasa, excuse me. Why did I say well? Gedola means Agasa means gedola, but okay. He says
it's the same thing.
Right? Exactly. He says
Don't rush out of shul.
Right? Exactly.
Don't rush out of this. You're with the master.
Look what he says here. V'lo amaran elo lemipak aval lemeal kol sheken derahitna. Right?
Don't rush out, but rush in.
Right? Exactly. Why you say exactly that? Exactly. He says, however, right? You say that when you're leaving, you should not. Right? There's only you shouldn't rush out. You're so excited, you know the whole answer already.
I don't. I don't.
So he says, the Gemara says that when a certain person leaves, right? We should not run out of shul when you're going out, but when you're going in, what should you do?
Rush in.
Rushing in, right? Rushing in. Exactly. Kol shekain. Right, we should certainly tell him. The Rif explains one of his approaches. There are many approaches the Rif gives, not now. He says, "Lo amaran ela shekavanato latzet legamrei. Az lo ya'al psia gasa. Aval im kanato lachzor levet hakneset kol shekein derahitna kidei lachzor yoter meher." He says this is only the case when you
don't rush out if you're not coming back in.
Right, but if you're coming back in,
you could rush out. Rush back in.
Right, because imagine right you go.
Exactly, you should.
Right, imagine
right.
Imagine you're davening in one place, but you have a shir in another place, right? So you should definitely run out, right? I mean, not rush out without disrespect, of course, not disrespectfully, but you should go out and rush to the next place to learn, right? But if you're running out and then you're going to work or whatever it is, yes, those are all valid reasons, but you should make sure that you show a little respect. Now we're going to tie it in. He says, "V'af kan Moshe mitchila lo haya rotzeh lared, lefi shaya nosea milifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'tzarich lo lered benachat v'yishez man harbeh." He says Moshe originally did not want to go down from the mountain. Why not? Because he was moving away from Hashem, and therefore he had to do what? He had to go down slowly, similar to the way one leaves a Beit Knesset. He shouldn't do it rushed, right? V'yishez man harbeh, right? Going slowly, goes down. V'haya mitzaren, he was scared. Pen benkach uvenkach, then perhaps in the meantime Hashem would say to him, right, Yitena Torah, Hashem would give him the Torah, right, and before he can return to the top of the mountain, right, and mishum hachi lo haya rotzeh lared, and therefore the first time he said, Hashem, I don't want to go down, because I want to be there when I receive the Torah, when you give the Torah. He was scared. Moshe was scared about what? He was going down slowly because he was scared that as soon as he starts getting down the mountain, Hashem's going to say, oh, you're halfway down the mountain, I'm going to give the Torah now. So Hashem says what?
Wow, this is a nice chiddush.
Right, so he says here, "V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu hivin zo hatayirat Moshe." And Hashem says, "I understand it, I got it." B'pam hashenit amar lo, "V'alita ata v'Aaron ho'il shekavanatcha lachzor tuchal laredet b'psia gasa menutza v'limed lo az perush zeh." He says the second time he says, "Go down and go get Aaron." Now, once you go down to get Aaron, what? You have a purpose. You have a reason to go down, and therefore, once you have a reason to go down, you can rush out, and then you can come back up and get the Torah. And then once he understands that, right, he says, that's exactly, Hashem says, therefore it tells Moshe that you should go down the mountain fast, even though Moshe was scared to go down, he wanted to go down slowly. He says you go down fast because now you have a purpose. Your purpose to go down is to come back up with Aaron, and therefore what? Your whole going down is it's like going out of shul, right? If you have a purpose to go out of shul, and therefore you're going to another place of Torah, then you can rush out. So he says the same thing. You should rush down, pick up Aaron, and therefore now you have a reason, and therefore you can go back up again and come back up with.
So what was Hashem's reason to tell him to go to make the people watch out?
Yeah, I think the real reason is Hashem wanted Moshe to be there with the people. You know, you can make a lot of explanations to why Hashem wants Moshe to be with the people, but I think the main reason is that Hashem wanted Moshe to realize, to see. Hashem wanted Bnei Israel to see that Moshe is a man of the people, quote unquote, and also he wants Bnei Israel to never doubt, and people, the way I understood it, is he says he doesn't want people to ever doubt that Moshe was up there, and so maybe he was saying some, mumbo jumbo, crazy stuff, and therefore people are like, oh, that guy up there some time ago, he said...
Did some witchcraft.
Yeah, he said some things, whatever. We don't know what he actually said, but we believe that he said it, right? But no, he says, I want people to say Moshe was with us, right? That's the only way to do it, right? The only way to prove, the only way to say that we really had Matan Torah and everyone saw it is if Moshe was down there. Because if Moshe was at the top, doesn't make sense. We know. Right? Say, Kenyer Suha'am, they're going to get destroyed.
I'm just giving like a simple example. Like, you're friendly with a famous musician.
You pass the seltzer,
and he brings you to a show, and he just kind of like, he's like, don't go here, and you just let it leave. You're like, but then he comes, and he's like, how's it going? I'm just reminding you, like, everything's cool. Just stay over here. And you're like, thank you for coming while you're in the middle of your show. I appreciate letting me know that you're still with me. You're still,
exactly.
And then you go back, and then the action happens. But
exactly.
And it helps to be with the people, really.
Right. I think it's fascinating that's the case because
I had the opposite.
What?
I once jumped on stage. My friends had a little concert. I jumped on stage there. I started playing the bongo because I know how to play bongos. And they were like, get off. I don't care who you are. Nobody jumps on stage.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, so that's when he's come down. He's come down. Just before you think that it might be
I don't care who you are.
Like
my childhood friend, my childhood buddies I grew up with, they had a little concert in Tel Aviv, and the bongo was sitting there empty. So I jumped up, started playing the bongo. They're like, get off, I don't care who you are. Nobody jumps on stage.
Well, that's what I think. I think the purpose of the whole Vigbalta twice, maybe that's another reason as to why Hashem says twice. One time people are like, all right, whatever, we're testing. Maybe we'll test Hashem. And Hashem says, no, Moshe, remind them, don't get close. Just the same reason. Like, I don't care who you are. You think you're the Kohen, you think you're from Levim or whatever, or you're Moshe's son, child, grandfather, whatever. Yeah. No. Don't do it.
It shows Hashem's rachamim.
Right. He says, I care.
Well, you don't really want the disaster at the event.
Right, exactly. The main event, you don't want any, there's no second chance, but there is a
lady
second
I know
chance.
from the old city, a Rebbitzin, a very holy lady. She made Aliyah like 50 years ago. And before she really started getting like real Haredi, she went up to Harabait into the mosque. Mm-hmm. And she put her hand to touch Evan Ashtia. Mm-hmm. And she heard like a voice saying, watch out, don't touch it. And she didn't listen, she wanted to touch it. She touched it. She said she got a shock. The second she touched it, from her head down to her toe, she fell down on the floor. And the Arabs took her out.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the second one. You have another time for another one?
It's like
one more Torah, guys.
Just got warmed up, Mordecai.
Just got warmed up.
You don't have to go home yet.
Okay, fine. So we'll do one more. Okay, we'll do one more. We'll do one more.
He reiterates: don't take your animals inside. Your servants and your animals.
Yep. Okay, so we'll do one more. If you looking at the Zera Shimshon of this week's Parshat, there's a lot. He does a wonderful thing.
Would you like any more food?
Not right now. Thank you. He does this wonderful thing. We'll do the first one actually.
Olive?
No. Hold on one second. I want to see which one is the one that I liked. I liked all of them, but. Yeah. Okay. We'll do this one. So he makes it. It makes a beautiful. He takes this beautiful between Drushim Kaf Aleph. He does between Torah 21. I think it's 21. 20. Sorry, between Drush 22 and 25. He basically. I mean, I'm 26. Excuse me. He says he basically tries. He takes. We all know the famous thing that there are 10 dibrot, and each one of them, each dibra compare, the one on one side compares to is something correlated to the second one on the other side, the other one on the other side. So he shows in each one of them, he shows a beautiful connection between them. So we're not going to go to all of them, but he does say we'll go to the number Kaf Hey. Yeah, Kaf Hey. Just make sure.
You don't want to do the first one? Of Anochi?
We could do it. We could do that one instead. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not as familiar with it, but I'm sure we can learn it together. It's not a big deal.
I mean, Anochi is the first one,
Yeah, it's a little bit longer, but we'll learn.
Hashem Elokecha is the number.
Mint זה איזבה או...
Isbe.
I think it's
It's
big.
big,
Yeah, I believe so. Okay, so we could say, we'll do Atse. Mine.
Isbe is like Ise, because it comes from the ground. It's the Atse, which is from the tree.
And if you don't know, you say mine, right?
Right,
If you don't know, you say Mine, the same way if you don't know what food, you say Shahak. Hadasa is Atse, because it comes from a tree.
It's fire proper for
Okay, so we'll do Kaf Bet. We'll do Kaf Bet. It's a little bit longer. We'll stop in the middle probably.
and for Hashem on earth.
What's the fifth one?
Glory
She was
Hashem
the
on
Talmud
earth.
Chacham guy.
I
He just
tried
looks
that
like a
already.
little.
Who makes that
It's
bracha?
all
Okay, so
down
let's-
one plant.
All right, so let's do number 22. Anochi and Lo Tirtzach. This is where he explains his theory and process about the next few drushim. I'm going to admit that I don't necessarily know this one so well, but we'll try to do it together, and hopefully we can get through.
Which one?
22. It's called Torah 22. This is where he makes his introduction in the relationship between the first set of 5 dibrot and the second set of 5 dibrot. And he says, Anochi velo tirtzach. Right? The Anochi is the first one, and Lo tirtzach is the sixth one. Aseret dibrot hayu ktuvim chamisha aluach zeh, v'chamisha aluach zeh, zeh keneged zeh, v'dibur rishon Anochi mechuvan neged Lo tirtzach. That's, he's quoting a Mechilta. He's quoting a midrash that says basically that each five are on what the 5 and 5 are one on each side of stones, and he says therefore the Anochi is correlated to Lo Tirtzach. And now he says U'lekashram yachad b'derech remez nakdim madamrina b'chagiga perakama, and he says in order to explain what's going on between the relationship, right? The implication is that the Mechilta is saying is that if there are each 5 are written on a stone, a separate stone, and one is connected to the other, one is correlated to the other one, there must be some sort of relationship between the two. Otherwise, why make that Mechilta at all? So he's saying is 22. Kaf Bet. I don't know which daf that's on.
Tatach.
Tatach. Okay.
Totach.
Totach. Right.
Totach.
Anyway, so he says is let's explain what it says in Parak. It says in Chagiga. It says Baalei Asufot Elu Talmidei Chachamim. He says that in the Kohelet it says Baalei Asufot, and it says these people are the Baalei Asufot, the people who are assembly. The Asufot means Asefa, like come together. He says is Elu Talmidei Chachamim sheyoshvim Asufot v'oskim Torah. Halalu metamim v'halalu metarim. Halalu osrim v'halalu matirim. Right. And he keeps. It goes back in Chagiga. It says go back to several times. Basically, saying is that the asufot that Kohelet describes. He's saying that the Gemara says that asufot are these gatherers of chachamim, and some of the people of the chachamim say they're asur. Some of them say mutar. Some of them say it's tameh. Some of them say tahor. Either way, he'echani lomed Torah me'ata. Right, so he says upon receiving this, a person says, "How can I study Torah?" Right. In other words, if one person says it's asur, one person says it's mutar, what have I learned? Right. So he says, "Talmud lomar kulam nitnu mero echad." Right. In order to make sure that we don't ask the question, "How do I learn this?" What do we say? Everything was received from what? From one shepherd, miroeh, with an ayin roeh echad, one shepherd. Kulam el echad netanan ufarnas echad amran mipnei adon kol ha'maasim shneimar vayedaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'eleh. Afata say oznecha kafar chesed uknei lecha leiv lishma divrei aposlim v'divrei machshirim ad kan lashano. Right. So the Gemara says, basically saying is, if the asufot, if this gathering of people is responsible, is the one is referring to, sorry, not responsible, referring to these gatherings of Talmidei Chachamim. Some people say it's tahor, some people say it's tameh. The rabbi says it's this, it's kosher. The other rabbi says it's not. Right? We all know that kind of statement. So what is a person going to say? How do I do this? What am I doing? Right? So he says as well, the Gemara says, everything was given from one shepherd, one person. I mean, from Hashem. Right? Right? And one Hashem, right? One leader gave it over. Who was the one leader? Moshe. Right? In the mouth of Hashem, in other words, Hashem, the creator of everything, was the one who he gave it over. He's the one who gave it over. As it says, Vayedaber Elohim et kol hadvarim. Elohim.
Because the guy is saying to himself, "Hey, I don't know what's the MS.
Right, right. So he says,
it's all emet from Hashem.
Right, it's all emet. Right. You may say that this is right. You may say that this is wrong. You have on what to stand because what? They're all. It's all back. Goes back to one source. Comes back from Hashem, who gave it to Moshe, right? Like Moshe, right? Hashem, right? Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, right? Right. In other words, there's a tradition, right? You too make your ear, right? And learn to make your ear like what's called an afar chesed is called it's a hopper, right? It's like basically a funnel. Make your ear like a funnel. Take all the information in, but learn to be, start learning to filter, to learn to understand different things, right? Learn to understand things. That's what the Gemara says. So the Zera Shimshon asks a question. Tzarich iyun. Demai salkadatach u'mayim etaretz. What's the answer or what's the question? Right? The question is, where he says, look, how does the question, what did the Gemara think in its question, and how does it resolve the problem? Right? The kamar shema yomar adam. Right? If perhaps a person may say, how can I study Torah? Why? Give it all these different options, right? Give it all the different opinions. Is that omer tahor, is that omer tameh, is that omer asur, is that omer mutar, right? So how can a person learn? Right? He says, I don't get it. The Zera Shimshon is asking the question. The Gemara says that the person who we say the asufot are Talmidei Chachamim, right? Some Talmidei Chachamim say it's mutar. Some people saying it's asur. Some people say it's tamei. Some people saying it's tahor, right? And what does the guy say? I don't get it. How do I learn? Right? How do I learn? Right? And what's the answer? Don't worry. Everything comes from one person.
From one God.
One God. Is that an answer to the question?
Yeah.
To you, yes. But I'm saying to the Zera Shimshon, he says, I don't get it. That's not the answer to the question. The guy has a question. He's having a problem learning. You're telling him that. Right? He's saying is look what he says. He says koshi derech hateva lilmod Torah michmat machloket. Right?
Too many opinions.
Too many opinions. Right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions. I don't get it. What do you want me to learn? Because there are 2 Jews and 3 opinions. I don't get
all
it.
from the same source.
Right? So he said, okay, so that's even worse. It makes it even worse. If there's one source, then there shouldn't be one opinion. Right? So he says, Ma'atei roots. Shekulam amra Kadosh Baruch. Oh, everyone, Hashem said it all. That makes me feel better. Right? The opposite. If Hashem said it all, then there should be one answer. Right? L'chora mashatanu lohodala. Right? Seemingly the answer did not answer the question. Right? Omnam, and he says now he's going to start answering. So he says is Omnam beper kama davod azar amrinan amar Rav Chisda kol alomei Torah merav echad eno roeh siman bracha leolam. So he says, right? Ani mila bisvara aval begemara mechad rabba maalei ki yehechad delo lifgom l'shaneh. So he says is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, Rav Chisda says, it says a person learns all of Torah. I mean, kol alomei Torah. A person who learns Torah, from one Rav, one teacher, he never sees a sign of bracha in his life. In his studies, not in his life, in his studies. Right? But he says, Gemara says, this is only referring to svara, in other words, logical answering and understanding.
In other words, because there's different opinions.
Right, different opinions.
There's svaras.
Different ways
you have to use your brain in different ways.
Right, and one person can't explain it all to you. Enjoy, have a good night. So he says, but when learning Gemara, in other words, when receiving the received text, studying from one teacher is better. Meaning, in order that his version of the law shouldn't be, adversely affected. So what is he saying here? So basically, he's saying is that there's one style with svara, logic, right, and understanding. You should learn from multiple people because your logic and your understanding of things needs to come from different sources. But from the study of Gemara, what he says regarding to Gemara, received text. What does he say here? I guess the tradition.
The Masorah.
Right.
The Masorah. I have one Masorah of how to read the Shas. How to read Rashi, Tosfot. There's different ways of learning. You learn with one Rav.
He's right.
So you'll know how to give over to Gemara.
Right. So I think he's saying exactly. He's saying is when the term is used by the Gemara itself, the meaning is received tradition, like you said, Masorah. Okay. So now he says, V'zot svara hi pilpul. He says the pilpul. The svara is pilpul. The logic is referred to the element known as pilpul. What is that? He says pilpul is basically analyzing the Torah law. Okay.
This is pilpul. Zera Shimshon's pilpul.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's very the perik dalet nadari amrinan deshabetchila lo nitna leMoshe lezaro uMoshe nag batovat ayin v'natala Yisrael umakshi hatam gemara umaskinan ela pilpul ba'almahu shebetchila lo nitna ela Moshe. So he's saying is basically that the statement was not only in regard to the study of pilpul. Okay. So basically he's saying is that in Masechet Nedarim, that originally
only Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to get it.
And originally given only to Moshe and his children and his offspring.
So why did?
But Moshe conducted himself with generosity and gave it to Bnei Israel. And the Gemara says what? Like you said,
it's a bit of a kushya, no?
Exactly. He says, and then at the end they said rather Moshe was said only regard to the study of pilpul, meaning the way in which to analyze the Gemara, the back and forth, that little bit of analysis. A svara was given only to Moshe, and then Moshe said, "I've been given over to Bnei Israel." Okay, now I want to get back to the. I want to see where he gets back to.
To the Seder Durvos.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second here.
Zeo Noch Hashem Elokecha on the top left.
Yeah, numbers. Here at the end. Okay, I want to see if we can find a place where like a logical. Okay. Okay, so let's go where it says Kadesh Yitkayim Talmudcha B'Yadcha. Okay, so that's basically he goes back and forth. I'm intentionally skipping because of the time, but he basically goes back and forth in different ways as to why there's a logic, the difference between svara and pilpul. It basically goes back and forth between the difference between svara and pilpul. Now that I recall that, and then we go here, and he says, right. So he says here's.
Eli, you've been around in different rabbanim. You picked up different good things from different rabbanim, different tzaddikim, different things. That's what he's saying. You just went to one place. Think if you only went to one place, you would have much less.
Exactly. So he says here. So at the end here it says, the Gemara now, in order for us to learn, how do we make sure that the Gemara actually stays, or the learning actually stays with us? In other words, the fact that as a result of learning different opinions, what happens? It's impossible to learn only from one teacher. There's another way to do it. Shabbos. He says here.
Sure, you can't go.
No, I'm sticking.
So he says here. How do we make sure that the Gemara? How do we make sure that we remember what we're going to learn or what we're learning? He says, "Takana lasot simanim." You should make some sort of symbols. In other words, some people try to make shorthands. Some people make pictures. Some people make underlines. Make ways for you to remember the Gemara, right? Because what's the problem is we're all nervous that we're going to forget it. Right, and that's what they're trying to say. He says in the middle there. He says that one of the main concerns is that people are going to forget. So he says, "K'mosham Ruzal Hatzivi Lach Right, make road marks for yourself. In other words, along the way, as you're learning and going through the roads of Torah, make yourself marks and say, this makes association with this. This is how I remember that what it said over here. Right, This is what the Gemara says. Right, make for yourself, make your ear like a funnel, right? In other words, by learning through and taking steps to slowly retain it, your brain. He says here, a practical step establishing symbols. In other words, make your heart, acquire for yourself a heart, and make your ear like a funnel. He's saying the Gemara is referring to the practical steps of establishing symbols in one's learning. As the Gemara says, Bnei Yehuda demanche lehu simanim. The students of Yehuda established simanim. They made some ways for them to remember. Ikayem Talmuda. Bnei Galil lo manche simani lo nitkayem Toratam biadam. He says the difference between Bnei Yehuda and the people in the Galil. The people of Bnei Yehuda were able to make some sort of symbols and some sort of mnemonic devices and other things that would help them learn, and therefore their Torah stuck with them. The Bnei Galil did not. Now he says, okay, so basically he says is that the phenomenon of basically this entire part that we sort of went through quickly, he says that the forgetting of Torah affects the way that what happens. And we can see it. What happens when Torah Shebaal Peh is forgotten? Machloket, and what else happens? People start making their own versions of Torah Shebaal Peh. In other words, unfortunately, because people don't pass down Torah Shebaal Peh as well as they pass down Torah Shebichtav, because they're just like, we forgot it, or I misheard it, I mislearned it, whatever. And instead of trying to think of ways to remember it, what do? They forget it, and what happens when they forget it? They say, "Oh, I think I remember hearing something like this, and so I'll do that." Right? Instead of saying, "Wait a minute, I need to go back." Right? We're all part of that. I'm not saying that we can make our. What he says here. And this is the connection between the first and the sixth. He says, He says, this is why it's worth having pilpul, going through that whole experience of pilpul, right? He says, why? Will be to introduce novel Torah ideas to the world. He said, in areas of that might have become forgotten. Shema Tomar im yesh behem tam, lama lo nichtavu? Amar kra, asot svarim harbev en ketz, la'arot lechol tamid chacham, שבזה יהיה לו להרווח, שגם הוא יכול לחדש, ומה שיחדש החכם מדעתו, הם חשובים תורה ממה שניתן מפני הגבורה. So he says is, the whole point here is that he's saying is that there is some sort of benefit, that if you can make, through the pilpul, the whole point is that what happens when I talk through with you about learning Torah, about different things of Torah. I understand something, you understand something, we might make a new chidush. And he's saying is, if there wasn't room for chidush, what would happen? He says here. He says, if there was no forgetting things in the world, what would happen? Then there would be no reason for us to make new. There was nothing new. Because if we never forgot anything, then I would never have no idea of new. Right? I'd never forget anything. It would all be memorized. So he's saying is the whole point of pilpul, of the idea of going back and forth and expanding and taking battling it out of Torah, is because when we battle out of Torah, new things emerge, and those new things, the pasuk says, in Gemara, in quoting the pasuk, it says, "Asot svarim harbe in case, make and write down a lot of books." Kohelet says, right, but the Gemara quotes Kohelet. It says to show every Torah scholar. And I don't necessarily think it's only Torah scholars. He says, he has, that's the room, that's the space. When he says, Asot Chafetz...
if it's not a Torah scholar, then it's not a Torah book.
Right. But let's just say, let's say people who,
you go to university and you have the professor that studied the whole Bible, and he ended up, all the kids come out of Pikorsi for the professor.
I'm saying is any Jew who feels that he made a chidush. I'm not saying like I'm saying like a Jew who learns. It doesn't have to be a Rav to write a sefer down and to write down a chidush. I'm saying is if you feel that you're mechadesh something, write it down, and then maybe one chidush will lead to another chidush, and then write the book. Right? And he's saying is write the book, and he says why does the pasuk say write the book? He says because your chidush, that he too will be able to produce something that's new, and your chidush, he's saying is umashi chadesh hachacham midato, more of the idea, that new idea that you just made. They are actually considered as if they were given Torah from Hashem, straight from Hashem. And he says, this is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, She'el Echad Amaran. All of it comes from one Hashem. He says a person needs to be more mindful and respectful of what? Of Divrei Torah, of Divrei Sofrim, meaning people of Chachamim, more than the Torah itself. Why? Because the laws of Torah have what? Positive and negative commandments, right? Which they're turned against, some of them are punishable by death. Whereas the words of the sages carry what? The liability of death just for transgression. So he says here, and it says this is the reason why Anochi and Lo Tirtzach are connected, because we view the Torah insights, the new chidushim of the Torah scholars, he says, as if they were Yotzei from Hashem, Mipiach Gvura. As if he's saying is that basically why they connected, how they connected, and they're aligned. He says that the Torah, the words of Hashem, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the words of Hashem and the words of the Divrei Chachamim are the same. He's saying that they're equated. And he says, moreover, once one must treat the more respect, that is, he must treat a chacham and the words of the chachamim with more respect, and not incur a liability of death for transgressing the words of Hashem, thereby violating what? Lo tirsach.
Yeah.